And good evening. Thank you for joining us for Ask Nine. Joshua. Already
Close.
doing well. Jocelyn Pisha's joined me already. Boy, it's my fifth word and I'm already having problems. Thank you so much for joining us. We
Of course,
appreciate
yes.
that. We want to talk about the insanity defense. That's our topic because a lot of people have been asking us, what's the effectiveness of an insanity defense? Why would you have it? And it all comes to light, of course, because of a Marion father who is accused and admits to killing his 5-year-old son, but is using the insanity defense because of it. Give me a little bit of a backstory here.
Sure. So Matthew Schleier has a family, lives in Marion, was VP at an insurance company, and just was really struggling with his mental health from what people were saying, some diagnosis of major depressive disorder, anxiety, OCD, etc. Was trying to get help, was seeing doctors, but one day just utterly tragically strangled his 5-year-old son to death. And some of the witnesses for the defense were saying that he was experiencing psychosis at the time, that his depression had progressed to a psychotic state, and that he didn't know right from wrong, which is one of the mandates with Iowa's insanity defense. So we will see if that will work for Matthew Schleier. The lawyers are currently working on.
The trial is done.
Yes, exactly.
Closing
Trial's
arguments. This was unusual because, well, not unusual, but it was somewhat unusual because it was before a judge. And usually at the very end, you'll see the defense and the prosecution do their closing statements, closing arguments at the very end, where they lay out all of the facts that they presented and try to influence the jury. But in this particular case, it's a bench trial. It's before a judge. And so they actually did written closing arguments.
Exactly. And those are due a couple of weeks in March, kind of rebuttal, and then rebuttal against that. So we probably won't get a verdict from the judge until, my guess would be early April. The county attorneys have to go through other trials in the meantime. So
well, and let's review what had happened. Jocelyn's story aired Friday at 10 o'clock. You may have missed that, so let's go back to that to see that story that you did at the end of last week.
Mental illness to the point of not knowing what they were doing. Or, as Johnson County Attorney Rachel Zimmerman Smith explains, they have to be incapable of distinguishing between right and wrong.
And it's the actual state of mind at the time of the act and surrounding the act that the jury or the judge has to decide on.
Criminal defense attorney Eric Tyndall says these cases tend to be bench trials, where the defense opts to have a judge decide instead of a jury.
So obviously in this case where you have a parent who killed a child, that's a case that is ripe for decisions to be made emotionally rather than factually or technically.
If the insanity defense succeeds, Zimmerman Smith says the next steps are focused on the defendant's mental health.
It's not like it is when somebody would be found not guilty in a regular criminal trial because they're not actually set free.
She says people are sent to state mental health institutions, with reports sent periodically to judges on their progress. People can often stay for years until they are no longer a danger to themselves or others, leaving the door open for Schleier to potentially become a free man someday, if his insanity defense holds. Tyndall says this case is just one example of the criminal justice system being reactive.
And I would just wish the legislators would move past the emotional response to the victims of crime and spend a lot more time on the intellectual response to how do we avoid creating these victims in the first place.
He cited current legislation at the state level to increase sentencing times, saying this isn't the right use of resources.
We in the criminal justice system are really the least efficient and the least productive at dealing with them, but increasingly we are the only system available to deal with mental health conditions,
leaving the criminal justice system to work out the next steps in the wake of tragedy. In Iowa City, Jocelyn Pisha, KCRG TV9 News.
And Jocelyn, there is no argument of guilt that this murder did occur and at whose hands it was. The real question is mental sanity at the time of the crime.
Exactly. That's already been established. We saw in interviews with police that he was saying he had done it. He told his wife right after that he was feeling sorry, all those kinds of things. So yes, now it's does he meet the Iowa code for being insane at the time that he strangled his son?
So what is a sanity defense? I mean, you plead that you're insane. What exactly does that mean?
Right, and so I'm going to try to paraphrase what the Iowa Code is, but it's the person has to be in the words are diseased and deranged condition of the mind at the time, to the point of not knowing the nature and quality of the crime. So that would be not even knowing that he has killed his son, or that he did not understand right from wrong at the time. And so there was a phrase, morally and legally wrong, that was used at the time, during witness testimony. And so they said that Schleier, these witnesses are saying that Schleier did understand that he was killing his son, but he was doing it because he had psychotic delusions, that his son had such horrible allergies, just extensive, list of allergies, that he thought he would die this really terrible death. And so he chose to do it, what he saw perhaps as an act of mercy.
Well, because you kind of think, because we're not homicidal by nature. You and I particularly aren't. There are some times, but not very often.
Maybe a mosquito or something.
But you kind of sit there and you think, you have to be somewhat not right of mind at the moment of a murder. It's not what you're supposed to do. And so I think a lot of people might sometimes look at these insanity defenses and basically say, isn't this just a get out of jail free card? It's, I was insane then, but I'm better now.
Right. And so it's not quite, you're not guilty, you get to walk free. You are sent to a state, mental health institution. And as I understand, a period of every 60 days, a report is kind of sent back to that judge, saying they're doing better, they need more treatment, et cetera. And so you're definitely, you're institutionalized. You have to progress, and it typically sounds like it takes a couple of years from the sources I talked to get out and get reintegrated.
Now, the defense opted for a bench trial, which means, once again, a jury isn't hearing this case, a judge is. Tell me a little bit about that, because as you were mentioning earlier, things are operating differently. The judge is going to hand down his verdict in a few weeks. It's expected within days, as opposed to it's much quicker when it's a jury.
Right, exactly. So with this being a bench trial, the district judge is handling it, is hearing all of this. The criminal defense attorney I talked to last week was saying this is very typical for very technical stuff, right? So it's not, this is obviously like a tragic case. A jury might have everyone should have sympathy, right? And just see the tragedy here, but the judge is able to be a bit more specific and follow the letter of the law.
Do we have any idea how often this does work? Because as you said, we're going before a judge, so hopefully it's more sympathetic. That's the way the defense is looking at it. Sometimes you would think a jury might be more sympathetic in a lot of different ways. Do we know how effective, how often an insanity defense works in Iowa?
I don't have an exact statistic for you, but it's very rare. This is usually argued with some murder cases, a familial murder case, and also apparently in Johnson County it's happened with robberies and arson and just people who are struggling with a mental condition that are committing those kind of crimes. But it does not seem to happen very often because it requires so much to prove. You don't know right from wrong, or you don't know that you're committing a murder or robbing, or it's tough to do.
Well, and what's interesting in this case is that is not the case of whether or not a murder occurred and at whose hands it was. So it really boiled down to expert witnesses, psychologists, and a
psychiatrist and a mental health counselor. Okay. Yes, the whole range.
And different people of different specific expertise. Two things in regards to that. You heard all that testimony. What struck you most? And then the second question would be, it's always one opinion and there's going to be an opposing opinion too. And so I think if I was a juror, it'd be like, which person do I like better? Which one do I understand better? And that's not the way I would want to rule in this.
Absolutely, yeah. So the other thing that my sources were telling me, looking back at this trial after I've been covering it like past 2 weeks-ish, expert opinion is really important. You and I don't quite understand the mental condition of a person who's struggling with major depressive disorder. So you really have to have these very highly qualified experts. And with this trial, it was interesting, the kind of back and forth. There were 3 witnesses for the defense, 2 psychologists and psychiatrists, who all agreed on that psychosis and didn't know right from wrong. And one of them originally was called by the prosecution, interestingly, but then the state called him, the defense called him. The other person kind of disagreed, said that he did not have a psychosis diagnosis. So there was a little bit of tension there, I would say.
Well, and I thought it was also interesting the defense bringing up somebody who actually did have a bit of a unique viewpoint of what occurred.
In terms of,
As far as the mental acuity, I guess, or the mental
Sure.
status of Mr. Schleier.
sure. So, they had lengthy interviews. One of the psychologists said an 8-hour-long interview with Schleier in the months after he killed his son. So, yeah, these are, psychologists from Ames, and one of them was a University of Iowa kind of faculty member. So I would think that they know their stuff, kind of thing.
Well, tell me a little bit, because you covered extensively this court trial. It is tough to hear this testimony. Obviously, there's absolutely no winners in this case. It's a family devastated by losing a 5-year-old son, but also losing a husband and a man who they knew had some mental issues.
Exactly, yeah. Just a tragedy all around. There's, no words that are going to make that feel better for the family. And what really stuck out to me was that, yeah, Matthew Schleier and his wife were trying to get help. He was going to counselors, was turned away from a hospital because he didn't have a specific plan to take his own life. And then a few weeks later, took his son's life in a tragic way. So it touches on the law, it touches on your heartstrings and mental health in this state. It's just a tough situation.
And that last part is one of the last things I want to get to, is because your attorney had mentioned that there's so many of these mental health cases, and we're hearing it from police departments that are on the front lines dealing with this, hospitals that can only take care of a person for so long, and then they have to release them. Adults with mental health issues, their parents really can't do much because they are adults. And then once again, in the criminal justice system, we're seeing these cases matriculate in there so often. It seemed to be a little bit of criticism towards the state mental health system.
Exactly. And I was actually just interviewing someone today saying that there might be progress to address some of those issues. There's a bill that had just passed the House last week to double the number of mental health beds at our state mental health institute. So I think that legislators are looking at maybe trying to not have so many of those cases go towards the criminal justice system, like
Sure.
the source said, right? They're maybe not the best to deal with them, not the most efficient, not the most caring, So I think that that's definitely a conversation that's happening in the state legislature at the moment.
And you have to strike that balance between, warehousing people, so to speak, institutionalizing them and treating them and letting them still be a part of society. You hope that we have advanced as humans to a point that we're better at that, but still, like cases like this underline just the fragileness of some people and the lack of help that they sometimes can get.
Absolutely. I couldn't put it better. That was well said.
And what can we expect, because you're going to continue covering this story. We're looking at perhaps in the future some more stories on what the state legislature is doing, and we're looking forward to finding out what the judge has to say.
Exactly. Yeah. Trying to get some follow-ups in and go at it from all angles.
Well, thank you for answering our questions. I do ask you, and I do thank you. And of course, you can ask us anytime. Ask 9. We are on every weekday, Monday through Friday at 5:30. We're streaming. We've got a brand new app that's so fantastic that Becky was talking about earlier. It really has improved the services that we are offering you. So we really hope you are using our app or at least watching us streaming. And if you ever have questions, just message KCRG on Facebook or email us here at TV9. But for right now, thank you, Jocelyn, and thank you for joining us for Ask 9.